Alright, hi everyone. Today I want to talk to you guys about Charles Proxy, what it does, how you can use it, how I use it for development, and just try to give you that intro into it so you feel comfortable using it. So real quickly, Charles Proxy here is on the screen. It's a web proxy for a software web proxy for your computer that kind of proxies all the network traffic or whatever traffic you want. So you see pretty much all my network traffic right now is going through Charles, and it's recording it all for me. So it's a tool that allows us to see what's going on, but more than just seeing, you can manipulate what's happening. So I can manipulate any one of these requests. I can manipulate the response of a request. I can repeat any of them, edit one, and send a request off this way. So I've got a lot of different tools that Charles gives me for development that I kind of want to show you guys how to utilize and how I use it. So let's just jump right in. First, you can see everything's coming through. I'm going to jump over to Chrome, and I picked this site, framefish.com. It's a site that was built by Angular and was on a list, and I thought it was cool looking because you can try on different frames, and so that's kind of cool. I can try them all on, and I was looking through, and I think these pink ones, maybe these blue ones, really bring out my forehead really well. Anyways, so what if I was working on a site, and again, this isn't my site, this is just a site out there. I don't have to be developing to use Charles, and I want to kind of see the service request, which had these frames right here. I'm going to go ahead and refresh this page, and what you'll see is framefish request starts coming through. So I can type framefish, I can just type frame, do some regex. So now I'm going to see all of the framefish only requests here. So one of these is making the request for these frames, and I don't necessarily know which one it is. So I can kind of go through them and guess, and if I was working on the site I might know, but what I can do is just click in here and Control F and find anywhere in this session in whatever I want within this session, or if I had some selected, the body, the headers, I'm going to search them all and look for Tracy C2. And he finds this request that had it in the response body. So that's awesome. So I double click that. It takes me to that request. You can see now, I can see the overview of that request. Here is the URL. Here's some data about it, some timing, some sizes. The response compression, all that kind of cool stuff. I can see the arguments sent, any cookies sent. I can see the response in JSON, so I can kind of jump through it in a JSON view. And this is one of the things I love about it, because it knows what JSON is, it knows what XML is. I can actually parse through it in a more usable way. I can still get the JSON text of it, and that's great. That's awesome. So if I were to look in here and search for Tracy C2, I can see it is in this response here, along with other data. So one thing I can do is I can right click on this and I can add a breakpoint. And what that means is it will stop the requests or responses of that URL, this specific URL. So if I come back to framefish and I refresh, I see that Charles pops up and says, hey, you breakpointed this. What do you want to do? So this is the request. Here's all the things. I can edit the request if I wanted to in different ways. What I'm going to do is just execute the request, and it's going to breakpoint the response. So now framefish has responded, and I'm going to edit the response. So I can edit anything I want. I'll go to the JSON text. I'm going to search for the Tracy C2 glasses, and I'm going to go ahead and change the price. And I want to know what it would look like if it was actually negative $199. What if the service did that? What would the site do? I'm going to execute that. So that was successful. And I come back to the site, and okay, look. So anything negative puts parentheses around it, and you see the $199 was there. So I didn't have to change the service. I didn't actually have to put a negative product in there. I didn't have to change the code to pretend there was a negative number. I just changed the conversation between the two and saw how the site reacted. So I use that a lot. That's probably my primary use of Charles, is that kind of thing. Other things I can do is I can change the request. So let's go ahead and refresh this again. I hit the breakpoint. let's edit the request. And instead of, I've got 3 options that the URL sends: an offset, a limit, and a type. Instead of glasses, what if I don't want glasses and I actually want to search for some sandals? Like, that's what I'm in the mood for. If I could try on some sandals, that'd be great. I'm going to execute this request. Now what you'll see is it didn't breakpoint on the response because now the URL is different, but that's okay. I didn't really care. I wanted to see what the site did. Okay, the site says there's nothing found for my selection, which is probably correct. I bet they never sold sandals yet. I'm going to contact them, give them that great idea. But yeah, so it seems like the site handled that pretty well. And again, I didn't have to change the client code to do anything, but if it did request something with an error from the server, this is what it would look like. That's awesome. Another way of doing that kind of error checking that I do a lot is, let's refresh again. Hit that breakpoint. I'm going to keep the request. So the request is fine, but on the response, I'm going to edit it. And I'm just going to say it wasn't a 200. I'm going to say it was a 500 and it was not okay. Johnny 5 is not alive. Let's execute that and see what happens. So now I return to 500 error. You'll see it there, that it's a 500 error. And I'm stuck in this loading state. So apparently the site handles error responses from a server, but it does not handle a 500 error gracefully. It kind of stuck in this loading state. Now if I touch anything else, it's a different request. If I execute that request and that response, the site comes back to normal and I look amazing again. So very quickly, I've already shown how without touching any of the code, I can test quite a bit. And usually what I'm doing is I want to test that error case of where I was stuck in loading. I make that happen, and then I'll kind of start debugging my JavaScript code or whatever code it is. And I don't have to muck with everything in the middle to reproduce it. I can just change that one thing, reproduce it over and over again, and really make some progress debugging. So now I want to kind of show you some Cyrus examples of some of these things and how I've used it more recently. So I'm going to jump into, this is Cyrus 1X. This is a lot of the hybrid Commander's dashboard work we've been working on. I'm going to jump into the Ghost units. And what I want to test, a lot of times what I want to test, and what comes to Charles, is that loading icon. I want to test that while it's waiting for a request, there's a loading icon. So I want to look for this Ghost Recon mission. So I'm going to come back to Charles Proxy. Take framefish out. I'm going to type localhost star so I just see the localhost requests. If you kind of click on the last one, it'll tail the requests. So again, I can maybe look through what the requests were, but what I want to do is find the Ghost Recon. Okay, it's in the get missions requests. So what I want to do is just get missions. Let's just look at that. Keep it simple. These are the ones I want to follow. So in the JSON text, I'm going to look for Ghost Recon. And what I'm looking for is a Skynet ID. So this is the Ghost Recon mission. I'm looking for Skynet, and his mission ID is 5914. If I kind of look for that request, okay, here's the Skynet data requests. So that's awesome. So what happens if I breakpoint that request, which just kind of stops it from happening? Real quick, I'll execute these because they're auto-refreshing. I'm going to go back, click on Ghost again, and now it's breakpointed. So now the Ghost Skynet request is breakpointed. If I go back to the site, you can see it's in this loading state, and that's perfect. All the other ones loaded, I didn't breakpoint any of those. I breakpointed just this Skynet guy, and you can see he is loading, letting the user know he's trying to do something. That's perfect. That is 9 times out of 10 the first time I remember, I should use Charles Proxy for this because our local networks are too fast. I never see the loading icon. I want to make sure it stays there in the situations we expect. Perfect. I can go ahead and execute that request and response and all of the auto refreshes of that, and he comes back and he's loaded. Excellent. So next, I want to show you changing the data again. So for Ghost Recon, I have the mission that's unlocked. Real quickly, I want to just stop breakpointing this. So I'm going to right click on this guy on breakpoint. So I'll come back to this get missions. I believe. And I'm going to breakpoint him. So I'm going to refresh this page using our handy dandy refresh button. I'll keep the request, but I'll edit the response, come back down to JSON text, and look for Ghost Recon, ignoring case, it's always useful, and locked I'm going to change from 0 to 1 and execute. Almost hit abort. So now you can see I've got a little lock icon. So again, I don't have to go through and lock it. I don't have to change my data. I can just see that the app is functioning as I'd expect in these different circumstances. One more thing that I can do is that kind of can get tedious if you're kind of testing the same thing over and over again, especially if you're trying to debug and you refresh over and over again. What I can do is set a rewrite rule that will constantly do that. So right below it, I've got Operation Indecision Fancy. What I can do is in Charles, I've already got this set up. I'm going to turn off these breakpoints real quick. There is a tool for rewriting. So I'm going to enable rewrite. I've got this one already saved. And so what this is saying is for the location of localhost of any requests matching get missions, I want to do this rule. This rule, how I have it set up, is on the body of the response, any value, any text value in the response that matches Operation Indecision is going to say Raging Kitten International. I want to replace it all. So every request, I'm not doing anything manual, I've just turned that on. Let's go back to Chrome and refresh. Now it's Raging Kitten International. So every refresh that's happening, that's automatically rewritten. It's actually got the word fancy on it at the end because it's just replaced that first part. Fancy was still there. So now constantly it can do those things and be updating, and I can just debug and I don't have to change everything. You know, if it's a weird scenario or I don't know how to get the server in that scenario anymore, I can still debug and troubleshoot. So that's awesome. Couple more things I want to show you of how I've used it more recently. Let's go back to that get missions and breakpoint him. I'm gonna go ahead and turn off the rewrite for now, and let's refresh this guy. So let's execute it, and I'm going to edit the response to remove the Ghost Recon mission. Ignoring case again. So if I just straight up remove this mission object, he's no longer in there. I want to see what happens. This is something I did recently. Now it kind of highlights that the number has changed. It lets you know where it's at. If I refresh again, which it's doing right now, it goes back up to 11. So, you know, a lot of different use cases, not only manipulating data, changing the size of arrays, maybe deleting the whole array. What if I just want to block that request altogether? So instead of breakpointing it, what if I want to blacklist it? That's down here. Now every time this request happens, it'll blacklist, it'll fail that request. So come back here, hit refresh. I get an error, failed to load missions. Well, I think that's pretty good. I still kind of see all my old data. I can click on it and I can see a lot of my old data, even though I can refresh again and it still fails. That's awesome. That's super useful to know every time that is down, and I can blacklist a lot of requests, that it functions as I expected. Okay, so this has very much been focused about manipulating the request and response cycle so that I can focus on the client. But potentially, this is not limited to the client. Potentially, I want to do the same thing for service-based development. All right, so next I want to show you actually manipulating the server requests. So I'm going to go into this rename me mission. I'm going to edit him, and I'm going to call him Operation Friendly. I'm going to submit, saved. So you can see I got a lot of requests. I believe it's called mission edit. All right, so there's my service request. And you can see kind of my request, all the data I had, changed his name to Friendly. What I can do is I can actually edit this request. So it has nothing to do with the website, but I can edit the request make a new one. Well, this is similar to like Postman, but I kind of recorded it to start, which helps me a ton. I don't have to figure out how to create it or find the URL. I'll just go make the request, come to the form editor, change it from friendly to operation friendly kittens, execute, and now I've made that service request. So if I come back to the dashboard, and when it refreshes again, when it refreshes and I am not blacklisting that request, that'd be good. Refresh, it updates to friendly kittens. So now I can come back here and I can, this is the request that made it friendly. I can right click and I can repeat. So I can repeat it. So let's put it back to friendly. Let's put it back to friendly kittens. So now I can make service requests fairly easily. I can put all of these in a list and have these to reuse over time. I can just go back and repeat stuff over and over and over again to debug my server-side code. I can easily change that request without it being a big pain. I can repeat advanced, which says how often do I want to repeat it, what kind of concurrency do I want. So I've got some tools, not really a load tools, but it lets me do some things, which is kind of cool. So yeah, so it can be used more than just client-side focused. Okay, so next I have just a couple more tricks to show you that I use with Charles. I'll go to our landing page. And this is our landing page. I'll hit refresh real quick, and you can see it kind of loads quickly. But there's a loading icon there. And again, loading is kind of my first jump. What did it work or did it not work? I could breakpoint something, or I could just say, you know, the actual use case is what if they don't have as quick of a network? So I can turn throttling on, and I have throttling settings. So I can say for selected hosts, I highly recommend you select a host, because when you throttle your whole computer, there's more effects than you think. So let's just do it for localhost. I have it 3G. And there's different options that you can set and lots of different options that you can choose. Okay, let's go back. Let's refresh this page with 3G network throttling. You can see already it's just taking a while to hit my local PHP server and just request the page. So that's, you know, it's doing its job. It's taking a long time. 3G is very slow.
Very, very, very slow, in fact. Did not anticipate it to be that slow, so just kind of double checking. Throttle settings 3G. Looks like what I
wanted. Okay, so it's loading, and you can see that I do get this loading icon for the landing page, just like I want. So that's awesome. So you can do 3G and other things. We actually used this while Chemo was installing on site with a really bad network. We were getting some really weird race condition errors. We turned this on, and we were able to reproduce some kind of errors that led us to improving the site overall, not just for slow connections. So that's awesome, and you can tell things are slowly loading in. 3G is awful, and this is not a mobile supported site currently. So the next one, I'm going to turn that off real quick. The next thing to show is no caching flag. So a lot of times in Chrome, you'll kind of turn no caching on. I've already had this on this whole time, but basically, you know, caching things can be annoying. This kind of changes the headers so that nothing ever gets cached. Hypothetically, if I can turn it on for specific URLs or specific sites, I can turn it off entirely, and hypothetically it'd be quicker to load because it was using caching, and I turned 3G off. So those are kind of all the major features that I use for development that I think Charles is really useful for. I've got a couple tips I want to share with you guys and gotchas that have bit me in the past. The first one is SSL support. So as it should, if you try to hit an SSL site like the Cyrus demo site, if I hit this request, I go back to Charles, and if I look for Cyrus demo, I can't see the request. I don't even see the path. I don't see the URL arguments. I don't see anything, and it tells me SSL proxy not enabled. Basically, that would be you know, a man in the middle, kind of observing what's going on. So you have to turn it on through Charles specifically. So if I go to proxy settings here, there's an SSL tab, and I can turn it on for specific sites. So here I've already added Cyrus demo avature US.com. Turn it on. This can take a moment to refresh sometimes. So I'll kind of refresh the page a few times here. Hopefully it updates. There, yeah, so now I can see the request that was sent to Cyrus demo. I can see the response. If that was your first time doing that, you might have got a page here that says, hey, there's an unknown cert. Are you sure you want to continue? And that's normal because it's Charles Proxy making a cert saying, hey, I'm him, I swear. And you should accept that because it's Charles. I've gone ahead and accepted that whole cert for my site, for my computer entirely, so I never see that again. And there's notes on Charles Proxy's site on how to do that. It's really simple. Then I never get that pop-up of, hey, are you sure you want to continue? Clearly, I put Charles Proxy there. I know which sites I want to do that on. Trust Charles. So yeah, so that was kind of the first one. The next one I want to just mention how Charles works is good to know. So Charles is actually updating my Windows proxy settings. So if I go to Chrome settings, which is just the easiest way for me to find it, I type in proxy and I go to change proxy settings, which opens the Windows one. There's a LAN settings button down here, and you can see in the proxy section it says it's enabled. I don't use a proxy. If I go to advanced, it's saying it's going to localhost on 8888, which is where Charles Proxy is running himself. So it's basically saying network, move all of my network traffic through Charles Proxy, the software proxy I've got running. Now, this is important, I want to point out, because when I close Charles, which I'll go ahead and do, I'm just going to X out of him. I close him. If I go back to my LAN settings, it's no longer checked on. Charles is doing this for me. He's automatically turning himself on and off. So if I open Charles again, never had that open before. I'm sure it worked fine. Now it's enabled. The reason I want to point that out is if Charles Proxy crashes, which if you leave this open for hours, it can get a lot of memory and it tells you, hey, that's a lot of memory. You should turn me off or clear it. If he crashes, this will stay check marked. And Charles Proxy isn't running anymore, so then your network looks like it's no longer working. So keep that in mind. I mean, if that happens, you just open Charles back up and he'll work, and when he closes, he works fine. So it's not a big deal, but it is confusing when that happens. So yeah, so that covers everything I kind of wanted to cover with Charles. There's a lot more in here that I did not cover. There's a lot of requests or options in here. You can actually save all of these. Like I can save all of these requests in a session, in a little Charles session. I can save the whole sequence of requests. I can kind of go to the structure and I can see all the requests that are happening by site and where. I can save off, I can clear out all the others, and I just want to save these requests. I can do that and play them later. I can do a reverse proxy. I've never done that with Charles, but it's got the option to do a reverse proxy, so it sets up a little reverse proxy locally here for you. So there's lots more to Charles that I haven't played with, but that's kind of why I thought it was powerful, why I'm trying to share that information with you guys. Hopefully this was useful, and yeah, I don't know how to end this. So, bye everyone.